are wonderfully blessed to have Mitch back. Mitch Austin is here to continue on about our inner critic, our inner critics. We have lots of them, 7 of them at least. And we're going to hear today, Mitch, about how to thwart that inner critic, right? How to keep that perfectionist, that one of them, all of them, out of our lives. So take it away. Have fun.
Well, I'm so glad to be back, everybody. Great to see everyone. Inner critic, I've been doing this work now for at least 8 years. And it's one of the, I think, more powerful pieces that I do because that inner judge, that voice that's always either pushing you or holding you back, impacts our lives in really important ways. And when it's the only voice at the decision-making table of your life, it can keep you stuck, it can keep you small, it can keep you on the treadmill of success, doing. Any of that sound familiar to anybody? Yeah. So who would like to find the mute button? That's what we're going to do today. We're going to try and find the mute button to our inner critic. So this is a part 2 of the inner critic. We did part 1 back in September. And if you didn't get a chance to participate in the part 1 of the workshop, it is recorded and on the website. And I would encourage you to go back and do that. In part 1, we looked at the 7 types of inner critic that come from the work of Jay Early and internal family systems. Don't know how many people have heard of that, but that's where I get the 7 types. And if you go on my website, you can actually take a fun little quiz to find out which are your top types. But today, we're gonna engage in revisiting a little bit about the inner critic, so we're all kind of top of mind. So a little bit of a review from the first workshop, and then we're going to get into 3 core strategies for managing your inner critic, right-sizing it, and actually for partnering with it as well. It's not always the thing that you want to quiet. You actually want to use it in the lane that it's designated for, and keep it out of the parts of your life where it doesn't belong. So with that, I think I'm going to start the PowerPoint. We may do some breakout rooms and different things through the workshop. We're looking at about 45 minutes today, since we did most of the workshop in part 1. And with that, I will pull up our PowerPoint. So I would say what happens here stays here, but it is being recorded, so be mindful of that. I do appreciate participation when I ask questions. That we're all an inlet and an outlet for the wisdom of the divine. So we're all teachers as well as students. I invite people to share from what works for you and respect all opinions that are shared. Part 1, again, we went through the types of inner critic. Today, we're going to be looking at specific tools and strategies and wrapping up with a very powerful meditation. And let's see. So what is the inner critic? So a lot of times people have different descriptions for the inner critic. Oops, sorry. I always hit the wrong part of the screen. Get back to, there we go. There we go. So the inner critic is the collective voice of the world that operates through our ego. That part of us that believes we are what we have, what we do, what others think of us, and that we're separate from one another. So when we're only looking at the world through that lens, sorry, did it again. I was trying to expand the screen. There we go. When we only look at the world through that lens, that's a very fear-based kind of view. If we do believe we are only what we have, what we do and what others think of us, kind of a small sense of present leaves. We're at jeopardy. We're less than. If we don't do what we used to do in the world, some of our roles, right? If we're not, when the kids, when we have the empty nest and the kids leave, there's, well, now what do we do? Right? So all of these things can really stimulate that inner critic, that fear-based dialogue within us. But there's another voice as well. There's our inner champion and our spirit. But because the voice of the inner critic is so loud, it can really, unfortunately, tune out some of these other voices that we have. So individually, the inner critic can make us a little bit competitive. If you know somebody who's very competitive, I'm going to guess they have a very strong inner critic. They judge themselves pretty harshly. It also can create a kind of lack mentality, right? There's not enough to go around. Again, a fear-based kind of view. So selfishness, playing small, creates human doings. Anyone know a human doing? I know a few of them. I've probably been one a time or two. And it's also the dream robber. It keeps us from taking risks because really this voice just wants to keep us safe. In our world, unfortunately, collectively, it has some really damaging effects. It supports the end justifies the means kind of thinking that we see, particularly in our corporate environment. It's the mind behind fear-filled policies that start to give away our freedoms and rights. It's also behind violence, right? Separation. We are separate from you. Toxic cultural stories and harshness. So there's great value in us seeing what this voice does individually and collectively. So when we can see that there is this voice and it's just a part of us individually and collectively, but it's not all of us, then we can start to make different choices. So a couple kind of recap from the last workshop. The inner critic logic loop is really about what is the basic worldview of the inner critic. The inner critic believes that you've got to have something outside of yourself so you can do something to be something. So for example, you've got to go out and have a life partner, right? Go find your life partner. You got to have that so that you can do things together, loving things, and always have love in your life, see? Or if you want to be, successful, right? You want to feel worthy. You've got to go out and do things, either get the job or the money or respect, so that you can, prove your worth, do those things and be worthy, successful, all those types of things. The problem with this have, do, be model is that when you don't have, you're not. So if your partner leaves your life, you don't have love anymore. If you retire your position, you don't have, the worthiness, the success. So this becomes an unsustainable model. It puts us on the hamster wheel of success, and we feel like we never arrive. Anybody been there? When do I ever get to rest or feel like I'm enough or have peace or serenity? But the more sustainable model, the spiritual model, is the one that, Jesus actually promoted. And I believe when he was at the well and he was talking to the woman, he said, you know, if you drink of these waters, he's saying, if you drink of the waters of the world, the thinking of the world, the have, do, be model, you'll thirst again. But if you drink of my waters, you'll never thirst again. And the waters Jesus was talking about is the be, do, have model. If you're being love, you'll do loving things and you'll always have love in all its forms, right? If you're being abundance, if you're being success, if you're being peace, you do activities that align with the beingness that is within you. And there's an endless resource of that within you. So you'll never thirst again. You'll never have to depend on circumstances for your peace, for your joy, for your love. So I think it's important to distinguish between the two so you know which lens you're looking through when you hear the dialogue in your head. And I think it's very important to be intentional about that, how you're going to focus your mind and your belief system and which model are you using. The inner critic also has some very clever disguises. They're actually 4, and they're designed basically to keep you stuck, right? Because the inner critic's definition oftentimes of safe is immobile. Don't do anything, because then nothing will change and you will be safe. That's not true in a bigger sense, but that's kind of what that part of us believes. And so it has some strategies to do that to us. One of them is doubt, and that's the one we're most familiar with. When we start to move towards something that is different, that is change-oriented, like a dream or a new hobby or something we want to learn or something we want to change in our life that feels big, that voice will come up and start to doubt whether we want to do that. And that's a pretty straightforward thing that dialogue does. But then there's some others. Any procrastinators in the room? Delay. Delay is another strategy of the inner critic. Just finding ways to get us to put it off, right? We'll do it when we get around to it. I remember I saw a little round cloth once that said, this is a round to it. You could like buy it. I thought that was great. Anyhow, the other disguise is distraction. Anyone? You're going to do something really important, and maybe it's a project you're going to get into, or you have some, big deadline or whatever, something really important. And all of a sudden you get this idea, oh, I need to clean the room, or I need to go shopping, or I need to buy the cat food, or right? And all of a sudden, all that energy and focus you had to do something that was really important and felt big gets whittled away with all these distractions. And then it's the end of the day and you're like, what happened, right? So just be mindful that there's this kind of undertow of distraction. But I think the most deceptive strategy that's really at hand with our inner critic is when people say, I'm confused. It's sort of the smoke screen that stops you from forward movement, this idea of confusion. And what I often talk about when I give this workshop is really from a soul perspective. I don't believe we're ever truly confused. We have the higher guidance of our soul that's always present within us, that always knows the way. So why do we have this thing called confusion? And what I believe it is it's actually the fear behind this inner critic throwing up a smoke screen, because if you have clarity, clarity means you can move towards something. So when I work with people in sessions and they tell me that I'm confused, I ask them a different question. I ask them, what are you afraid of in this situation? And just by bringing the lens of where we're feeling the resistance and fear, then brings the clarity almost every time. It's a little bit magical. So if you do hear the words coming out of your mouth, I'm confused, I invite you to ask the question, what am I afraid of? And follow the breadcrumbs of that answer to your clarity. And then some other insights is that the inner critic loves to use a lot of the memes and mind programs we have in our society. You know, a lot of times we use the twos and the nots. I'm too blank to be happy, right? I'm too old. I'm too overweight. I'm too busy, right? We use all the twos. Or then the nots. I'm not rich enough. I'm not handsome enough. I'm not talented enough. Anybody know the twos and the nots, right? They're all there. So know that these little programs that we have, everybody hears them, and we all kind of know them when we hear them. You know, the early bird gets the worm, right? Good things come to those who wait. Which one is it? You know, they can be conflicting for sure. Oh, there we go. So I said, we have 7 types of inner critic. This is my website, spirituallyspeakingwithmitch.com. We're not going to take the survey today because we did that in part 1, but I did want to offer that to anyone in the room who would like to take the survey. You can either, you know, write down the website or take a screenshot of this, and maybe after the workshop today, you can check it out. There we go. Oops. Okay. So here are the 7 types of inner critic. Who were my perfectionists in the room? Anyone last time? Yeah. So the perfectionist tries to get you to do things perfectly. It has high standards. It wants to make sure you fit in, don't get rejected. And it probably in your upbringing, you may have had some parental figures who also had expectations. So if you had a lot of high expectations in your household, or some perfectionists in your household, you may have also went down this road. Then there's the taskmaster. The world loves a taskmaster because they get stuff done, even when they don't feel like it. So this critic wants to make sure you work hard, fears that you may be lazy or mediocre, and it often activates a procrastinator or rebel within you. So that might be one of yours. We also have the inner controller, tries to control your impulses for eating and drinking and all the good stuff. It also tends to have some harsh and shaming dialogue towards yourself just to protect you from you. It's all for your own good. The inner controller is motivated in trying to make you a good person, so you're acceptable. Then there's the guilt tripper. It's stuck in the past. So if you have dialogue that's saying, you know, you remember when you did this and it failed, or, you know, all those mistakes, I can't let you forget them because then you'll repeat them. And so I'm just going to keep bringing them up, no matter how much you improve. So that's the guilt tripper. And then we have the destroyer. And this is one of the most difficult of the inner critics that basically makes attacks on your fundamental worth. It's motivated by the belief that it's safer not to exist, that you are inherently flawed. I believe that I've noticed a lot of artists have this inner critic type really strongly. Also, people who are prone to deep depression tend to have this inner critic. And if you do, I would strongly recommend getting some support around that, because this is a really hard one to have in your mind, kind of talking to you and diminishing your light. Then we have the molder, or the underminer. So the underminer is a critic that undermines your self-confidence and self-esteem. Won't take risks, no risks here. Underminers are not taking any risks. And there's a belief that you can't, it's not safe to be visible. So if you grew up in a house where you're to be seen and not heard, you might have this inner critic, this underminer. It makes direct attacks on your self-worth, so you will stay small. It does the who are you? Who are you to write a book, to get up and speak? Who are you to sing karaoke, right? All those things. It's very good at having that dialogue. And last time I had mentioned that Australia has a lot of underminers. Culturally, they believe it's not good to stand out. They say the tall poppy gets its head cut off, right? So they don't buy into kind of some of the more American approach that everyone should stand out and be seen and those types of things. So I just want to review some of those types, and so that you can start to think of, are any of those types that resonate with you. So the perfectionist. There's some core beliefs behind these types. And I invite you right now to think about the type that resonates with you. And I'm going to read off the core belief behind these types. And I think it's really important to know what the core belief is, because beliefs are what drive our vibration, our choices, and ultimately our manifestations. For instance, the perfectionist believes doing things perfectly keeps me safe and makes me acceptable. That core belief, if the perfectionist is something that you resonate with, that you see within yourself, know that this is part of what the belief system is behind it. And that becomes a little bit problematic, right? Because the truth is you're acceptable whether you do or don't do anything, right? You are inherently valuable. Just the mere presence of your being is valuable. You don't have to do things perfectly to be acceptable or safe. So there's a higher truth at play than what's behind the core belief of the inner critic. And then next to it, you'll see some affirmations here. And they're really great tools for working with your inner critic. Progress, not perfection. It doesn't always have to be perfect to be powerful. There's some really good ones here, and I invite you to kind of look them over and see if any resonate with you if you're a perfectionist. Next, we have the guilt tripper. Remembering the pain of my mistakes keeps me from repeating them. And this is kind of a little bit of a blackmail approach, isn't it, to getting you to be successful. This type of core belief system doesn't really facilitate self-trust, that you need another level of pain or inspiration to not repeat your mistakes, like somehow you're not learning from them organically. Right? So there's a self-trust issue behind this one. The underminer doesn't want you, by not acting in powerful or significant ways, I will stay safe. Right? And we know that when people do act in powerful and significant ways, you win some true fans and some true enemies. Right? If you stand out, if you are doing something really amazing, there's always somebody who's going to look at you and say something, right? Whether they're right or wrong. So there is some logic to this, but this idea of not standing out in powerful or significant ways will keep you safe. Just being on the planet in a body, there's always going to be some jeopardy. Just walking around in your own life. So I think there's some falsehood here. Just because you play small doesn't necessarily keep you safe. Then there's the destroyer. I'm inherently flawed, and there's nothing I can do to change that. So this is kind of a hopeless. It doesn't even matter if I guilt you at this point. There's just nothing, no hope for you, which we know is not the truth. We are whole, perfect, and complete at our core, even if there are things we want to change or heal or do better at. And we need to remember this if this is the kind of dialogue that comes up for you. The molder, I must change myself and how I do things to meet the expectations of the world so I can be safe. Here's safe again, right? But this time, the road to safety is through meeting the expectations of the world. Do more, be more, strive for more, get better every day. I think there's a lot of, self-development gurus that are probably molders, I would think. The taskmaster, producing and doing in the world are my means of ensuring I am enough. The enoughness, again, is a thing, a core shadow that we have in our human family. And the high truth is you're a piece of the divine, you're a piece of spirit, which has always been enough, right? We're all a piece, a drop of spirit in an ocean of spirit that is all powerful, all wise, all loving. But again, these types come from the thinking of the world, and we need to bring a higher truth to them. And then there's the inner controller. Self-control and denial keep me safe from myself. Can't trust you, so I got to help you to remember that you can't trust you. But again, at our essence, we have a soul knowing, a compass, a strength, an inner champion that we can trust. And we need to remind our inner critic of that. So I hope that was helpful to go through for you. Astra Nidra, who I had brought up in the first workshop, again, she says, surprisingly, once you get to know your inner critic and understand why it criticizes you, you will gain empathy for it, its anxieties, and it is actually concerned that you will be okay and do everything right. You can use it as an ally. And we'll talk a little more about that in some of the tools. So what is the inner critic for? How can we partner with it? So right-sizing your inner critic. So what lane does the inner critic belong in? It belongs in the navigating the norms of the world. Navigating the norms of the world. When we come into the world, we don't know the rules of the road, how to be in the world. We have to be taught, right? Don't burp at the dinner table. Don't eat the last of the mashed potatoes without asking. Say thank you and please, right? We all get this script of how to be in the world so that we're not thought of in a poor light. So knowing the rules of the road of the world lets us get our intention translated in a way that we have meaning behind. I always use the example, if I want to go get a job, I can't wear my ripped jeans that I love to wear to the interview unless it's some special type of job that wants that, right? I have to have my inner critic come in and say, look, if you want that job, you probably need to wear a suit. Or if it's not a suit type environment, maybe you need to wear business casual, right? I need something telling me how to get my intention of employment at this particular location, how to do that. And that's really where the inner critic is helpful. And it can help us make good decisions from the vantage point of our culture or the world's expectations in alignment with what our goal is. The inner critic also helps remind us of our values and agreements that we've made to ourselves and each other. Those aren't bad things. It's not a bad thing to have a value of working hard, right? Or doing good work. It's just when working hard or doing good work come out of balance and spill into other lanes of our life, where we don't engage in self-care, and where we don't have some sense of ease and peace and flow because these voices are so loud. So the inner critic should not be steering the ship of your life. It should not be the only voice, the loudest voice, and the only thing you're making decisions from. It really needs to have an advisory role, right? It's one of the board members. And the main board member really should be your soul's voice and your inner champion, which we're going to talk about. The inner critic also has no business in the lane of your dreams, your goals, because it's going to talk you out of it even before you entertain the possibility of it. You know, if you have a idea, anybody have an idea drop in, and as soon as it drops in, it feels very big and inspiring, but as soon as your mind gets a hold of it and tears it apart, tells you all the reasons you can't do it, why it can't happen, why you shouldn't do it, and it gets squashed before it ever had a chance to grow. You know, I do a program called Rise and Speak, where I help people look at their lives and pick a moment from their life and create a message around it. I had a vision for that program in 2012. I remember it very clearly. I was falling asleep and I was thinking about a speaking class I was teaching. And then as I was drifting off in the twilight of sleep, I had this vision that we could do a TED Talk type of program that was more authentic around people's life stories, have them go through a journey of several weeks of putting it together and then perform it on stage in front of a loving audience. And it was so clear, so inspiring. But right after I had this vision, right, my inner critic got a hold of it. Who are you? You're not even out there speaking for money yet. What would you even teach these people? Like, it just went on and on. And so I didn't do it. For 4 years, I kept thinking about this idea until one day I decided to do it, scared, knees knocking. I would like to tell you that I had grown spiritually and I had overcome my inner critic, and that's why I did it. It wasn't the reason. I was entering ministerial school. I needed a little extra money for classes, and I thought this was a great program. I'll just kind of throw it out there. I just kind of threw it out half-heartedly, you know, little flyer. I didn't tell anyone about it. And then I ended up making an announcement at church about the program, and it filled up right after church. Then I was on the hook. So that's a good way to get past your inner critic. Put yourself on the hook. So you have to do it. And now the program's been going for 4 years. I just completed a show last night with 5 speakers. I've put 60 people through the program, and it's one of the most powerful things I think I've ever done. So, but again, that voice, what if I had just listened? What if I had stopped? What if I never got up on stage and talked about the program? The world would have missed out on something I could have brought. And so, you know, I ask you, what amazing idea or vision has dropped into your heart and mind that your inner critic is still keeping small or snuffed out or sidelined? If you keep getting this vision or idea, it is your divine assignment and it will be supported. And you need to ensure that part of yourself that keeps sidelining you, that's the truth. And there's a dialoguing tool you can use to help you with that. So now we're going to get into the 3 strategies. Strategy number 1 is dialoguing with your inner critic, speaking truth to the inner critic, using what Jay Early calls your inner champion. Right? There's another voice within us. The inner critic is not the only voice. So I want you to think about right now a situation where you often feel stuck or small. Maybe it's public speaking. Maybe it's, taking on a role that you don't normally take on. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about maybe a decision you've been putting off because you don't feel like you're enough or it won't go well. Why don't you call that up in your mind's eye? What is it for you? And I want you to just listen to the reasons why. Why? Why can't I do this? And it's going to tell you why. It's too late. You're too old. You're too tired. You don't have enough money. You don't know enough. You don't have letters after your name. It's going to tell you all kinds of things. And then as those things come up, I want you to challenge it. Is that really true? Is it really, really, do I know for 100% that that's absolutely true? There's no way, there's absolutely no way. Even if I partner with my higher power that is all powerful, all wise, it's in rooms and places and spaces I can't get into, but it can. It can open the doors that I can't directly. Is it really true I can't do this? The answer is probably no. It's not true. And as you start to unravel some of the ideas that this inner critic dialogue has as not being true, it lowers your resistance to be able to take action. I remember when I was going to do my first talk at a spiritual center. I'd been wanting to speak at this spiritual center for 7 years. It was going to be my first non-work talk, an inspirational talk on, you guessed it, taming your inner critic. And I woke up at the morning of, and I looked around my room and there were some things like, disarray, clothes here and there. My inner critic comes in and says, really, you're going to help people improve their lives and you can't even straighten up your room? Wanted to keep me small, stuck, wanted me to call up and say I was sick so I didn't have to do the talk, right? That resistance. But I said to my inner critic, that's not true. That's not true. But it'll use anything it can to keep you from moving forward. So what do? We need to not turn away from our inner critic because what we resist persists. What I'm going to invite you to do is turn to it, right? Thank you for always looking out for me. I know that you're concerned. I hear you, but it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. So you want to love, assure, and thank your inner critic. And when it feels heard, just like us, when we feel heard, we calm down. We feel safer. We feel more centered. We feel like things are going to be okay. That's the same thing is true with this part of yourself. So tip number 2, which is my favorite, I always say, don't be alone in your head without adult supervision. Use a lifeline, phone or text a friend, right? If we can't get perspective on our own by dialoguing with our inner critic, that's the time to reach out. But make sure you pick the right person. Don't pick someone who's going to agree with your inner critic, right? That's not going to be helpful. You want to pick a person that can partner with you and help you get perspective on it. Today's workshop is going to go 45 minutes, so I'm not going to do the one-on-one exercise because we're almost 40 minutes into it. But I invite you sometime today, if there's a person that you can do this with, because you brought up some inner critic dialogue earlier that you were challenging, just play with somebody and say, hey, can we just I want to tell you about this inner critic dialogue that's going on, and can you just help me get some perspective? You know, I'm doing this talk next week, and I woke up and my mind started saying, who are you to do this? Can't even clean your room. Like, it's coming up with all this stuff. And then invite the person to give you some perspective. Well, I know that's not true. You really do speak well, and you're a great teacher. You're a good person. Like, somebody who knows you can really help support you, be your wing person in getting past this dialogue. The other thing you can do is exaggerate the fearful dialogue, and that's fun to do with a friend too. Anybody know Barbara Sher? She wrote Wishcraft and It's Not Too Late If You Start Now. I actually trained under her for quite a bit. And she used this because she was deathly afraid of public speaking. Hard to believe because she was so talented. But she would have one of her friends or somebody near her exaggerate all of her fears. So the drill goes, look, I'm going to tell you what my fear is, and you're going to make something ridiculous and exaggerated out of it. So she would say, look, I'm really terrified to get up on stage. I think I'm just going to bomb. And then the other person would go, yeah, you're going to bomb huge. You're going to bomb so big, they're going to throw like rotten fruit at you, right? Like, they would just make the most ridiculous expanded comments to the point where laughter would come out, and some of that tension would start to become released, and the fear would start to look ridiculous. So that's kind of a fun one as well. And then number 3, meditations and affirmations. When we're in our heads, when we're above the neckline in our consciousness, that's where the inner critic voice lives. When we drop into our heart space, that's where it does not exist, and the dialogue turns off. Who's familiar with heart math? Anyone? Heart math, great work that they do about using the heart energy and heart-centered practices to mediate conflict. They actually teach this in schools to kids as well. I think it's brilliant. But let's do a little version of this just to get an experience of it. So I'd like you to bring up some maybe judginess you might have, because the inner critic is a judge. Maybe have some judgment around yourself or someone else, maybe a little bit of upset going on, maybe a little bit of tension that you're not happy about. Maybe a friend disappointed you. They were going to do something and they didn't. Maybe you're having issues with a neighbor or your spouse. Just bring up something that has a little dust up for you in your consciousness. Can everybody get something? Maybe you were cut off on the freeway the other day, whatever it is. Just a little tension. And now I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in and let it out. And I want you to imagine a white glowing light gently glowing on your forehead, right where your space is between your eyes, where your third eye is, a little spotlight shining there. And I want you to put all of your attention on that spotlight, all of your focus. Just feel into your body and watch that spotlight go down the bridge of your nose, tip of your nose, all of your attention on the spotlight as it drops down over your mouth, down to your chin. All of your focus on that spotlight of your chin, down your throat, following it down your sternum. And now the light is shining directly into your heart. This warm, glowing light, all of your attention right on your heart space in the middle of your chest. All your focus right there. And with every breath, as if you could breathe right into your heart. Just feeling the warmth, the calm, and the peace, right where that spotlight is. Dropping down. And you should feel a temperature change of emotion from anxious, edgy, judgy to calm, smooth, peaceful. And that didn't take but a minute. We can do that when we're in the grocery store line. We can do that when we're watching CNN to get us back to our center, to our peace, and out of this judgy, anxious, driven part of ourselves. Another tool I love to use, and this is one of my own creation, is what I call the 3 Bs. So when my mind is getting busy and it's getting anxious and it's trying to push and pull me and tell me to be more and doing awfulizing, oh, this might happen in the meeting, that might happen. I go to the 3 Bs. Because anybody gets stuck on, oh my gosh, something's bad's what is gonna happen? I gotta figure it out, right? We get stuck on the figure it out into the future. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. So the 3 Bs are be here, be here. Be here, right where you are right now, in your chair, in this workshop. Just be here. Don't try to be anywhere else. And be now. What am I doing right now? And focusing on the now activity, which is listening to Mitch telling me about the now activity. And then be grateful. Bathe in the energy of gratitude. The vibration level that gratitude is on, the inner critic cannot exist on. It just can't enter the room. So the 3 Bs are a really quick way to be in the present and to raise your vibration so that the voice of the inner critic cannot be in the room with you. I also invite you to monitor your language. Anytime we're using should or could, your inner critic is in the room. It's at play. You should do this. Poor perfectionists get this a lot. And switch it to could. Could is much more empowering. It puts you at the center of the decision and not some guilting idea outside of you. Instead of try, just make a decision. I will, I won't, or I'm still thinking about it. But there really isn't. Try is just kind of a punt. We all know that, right? I will do it, I won't do it. I'm still considering it. Much more empowering than this very fuzzy, non-committal, sideways word of trying. And talk to yourself like you would a friend. Our inner critic can be so harsh to us. We're oftentimes much harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else. And when you hear this kind of dialogue come in, ask yourself, would I talk to a friend like this? Then why would I talk to myself like this? And stand up, use your inner champion to have that dialogue. So now we're gonna move into the final portion here, if I can get my PowerPoint to move. We're going to do a very powerful meditation. So your inner critic does want to be heard, acknowledged, respected, and reassured, just like we all do. It's a piece of you. Stomping it down, judging it, cutting it out, disliking it doesn't help. It's a part of you. You got to care for it, just like all the other parts. So we're going to do this meditation by Colette Baron Reed. And I'm going to go ahead and end my PowerPoint so that Kyle can bring up the meditation. And it's called the Goblin Meditation. Go. And this meditation is on YouTube, and you can get this meditation, use it anytime you want. It's called The Goblin by Colette Baron Reed. And I just invite everyone now to get comfortable, feet flat on the floor if you're sitting. And while Kyle's pulling it up, I will just invite you to take a breath in. Let it out as we now go into the meditation.
So let's do the Goblin exercise together. The best way to engage your goblin, when you first invite him into your consciousness, when you close your eyes, you imagine that there's a cartoon character that shows up. So allow your imagination to go crazy. When I first did this exercise, I had a hoot. I had Mr. Potato Head. He was my goblin. What do you know? I expected a pretty fairy, but anyway, what can I say? So just allow yourself to just let your imagination fly. Whatever shows up is the right one. And it may change every time you do the exercise. Sometimes it's easy to imagine an actual little green goblin like Shrek or something. And it really, really works. And all of a sudden, when you start paying attention to the goblin character on this stage that I've suggested in the book, you start realizing that you are not the goblin, because if you're engaging conversation with the goblin, and if you're listening to your goblin, you are not the goblin. That's how you end up disempowering him. Make yourself comfortable and just follow my voice, because you're going to be closing your eyes now and not looking at me. So close your eyes, take a deep, deep breath, and relax. And imagine that you're sitting all alone in a big giant theater with plush seats. You're all by yourself, and this is your special place. Ahead of you is a giant stage with really heavy curtains, and behind the curtain is your goblin. You're going to invite the goblin to come out from behind the curtain. There he is. He's going to pop his head out and stand on the stage in front of you. You want to invite the goblin now to talk to you. What does it have to say to you? Just let it talk. Don't try and change anything. The goblin really wants to talk to you. And after a period of time, get up from your chair, and you'll notice a stairway that goes right up onto the stage. Go up that staircase, and you'll notice that the goblin has become smaller and smaller. And see this ranting little creature, and ask it what it wants. What it really wants is for you to love it. You'll see a pink baby blanket beside you on a table. Pick it up and wrap it around the little goblin, who's by now gotten so tiny, it's like a teeny weeny little baby. And there it is, all exhausted. And hold it up to your chest. Feel nothing but love and compassion, for this is a part of you that you have neglected. And promise your little goblin that it's safe and secure and released from its suffering and anxiety and anger and resentment and hatred, because all it ever wanted was for you to love it. How does that feel? This is a great exercise to do more than once during the day. And it works. When you get the goblin to go to sleep, you get the goblin to relax, to let go. Your intuition's going to come in loud and clear. It won't be distorted, because the goblin...
How was that for everybody? What did you get as your goblin?
I got Casper the ghost.
Ah, that's great.
Frankenstein.
Oh, very
But it-
cool.
But it was, from Blazing Saddles, so it was funny. Or
I found the meditation moved too quickly for my imagination to do what it was being asked to do. So I had to kind of disregard the video and start doing it on my own at my own pace, which I found to be more difficult than just listening and trying to follow instructions. And I felt a resistance to doing the exercise or the meditation, as though, the inner critic knows that if it starts a dialogue with me, it's not going to be good for the inner critic. And so I also found myself wanting to put it off, and I also wanted to do something else. And I also wanted to turn off the computer. I mean, I was just having all this stuff happening while I was trying to interact with the goblin. And I thought, well, this is crazy.
Yeah. It was resistant. It wasn't gonna come out from behind the curtain.
No, it didn't want to be on the stage at all. Didn't want to interact.
No. Thank you, Doug, for that feedback. That was very, very interesting. It's very resistant to being seen.
I got Gollum, and Gollum was very, very skinny, undernourished,
Oh,
and really appreciated being warmed up with a blanket, but more importantly, it needed to be swaddled and held close and warmed and fed. It was powerful.
was that most people's experience, that it needed to be held?
No, my goblin was, well, this is really weird. My goblin was the Tasmanian devil running around. All over.
That's great.
I don't know what to make of that.
And mine was kind of like Speedy Gonzalez with he had a big mustache, and he was not he was not having being held. He was all over the place.
I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So
mine
this-
was kind of like Heather's. A Speedy
Yeah.
Gonzalez or a busy bee. So busy that we don't have time for this meditation.
You must have a
We gotta
taskmaster.
accomplish something.
You must have a taskmaster. I think the taskmaster
Oh,
have really busy ones.
Yeah,
Always.
well, let's see. A former, always forming myself, forming others, shaping,
Yeah.
trying to accomplish something.
Wonderful. Well, we've kind of come to the end of the workshop. Were there any tools or things that stood out for people that you think you're going to use moving forward?
Well, I certainly think so. I find myself confronting the inner critic more often than I used to. And I think part of that has to do with the fears that come with growing older and becoming less and less significant to people around me or to the world in general and to things that's going on. And part of me just wants to let that go and just be and just, be part of that journey. But there's another part of me that resists that and want to continue to be engaged and be connected. And so, yeah, I've been reading some stuff in regard to Buddhism lately, and one of the things they talk about Buddhist psychology is that when you're in pain, mindfulness of the pain is important, and that when you are mindful of the pain, you have to kind of discriminate between the actual stimulus or the actual physical part of it, as opposed to the suffering part of it, which is in your mind. You might have you might have a stabbing sensation in the stomach, but what you do with that stabbing in the stomach is suffering. And I guess my point is that the more mindfulness you can generate around something that's disturbing or bothersome to you, the more likely you are to be able to dialogue with it, can acknowledge it, accept it, transform it, do something with it rather than just escape from it.
Right. Thank you, Doug. And that was very, very insightful. Thank you so much for that share. That is powerful if we can do that. Well, it's been great working with everybody today. I hope this was helpful. I hope you had a good time. Always love visiting here with all of you. And thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Thank you very
for
much,
being
Mitch.
here. Fabulous. Absolutely.